A friend of mine was sent a set of fence posts with a QR code on it because you can't just put a set of fence posts in the trash. You're going to try and scan the QR code to return it, right? So they're sending low-cost, large items that are, make it more likely that you'll scan the QR code to get a return label to return that product. So they're getting smart when they're dealing with these things.
Without supplies, there's no surgery. Without products, there's no patient care. Welcome to Power Supply, the healthcare supply chain podcast focused on helping you navigate the intricacies of logistics, purchasing, contracting, and supplier relationships. Each episode, we speak with healthcare executives, supply chain leaders, and innovative entrepreneurs from across the country as they share their stories, experience, and expertise on the industry we love. From the loading dock to strategic sourcing, from buyers to the C-suite and across the enterprise, we tackle the real-life issues impacting the healthcare supply chain. Whether you're tuning in for conversation or inspiration, we're glad you're here. You're just in time to hear it from the source and stock up on insight. So sit back and plug into Power Supply.
On this episode of Power Supply, we will be speaking with Mark Manning, founder and CEO at iTRACE Technologies. QR codes are everywhere, and they also pose a security risk. Maybe you didn't know how much. You're going to find out today as we talk with Mark Manning. Gary, I'm interested because we had that conversation with Adam Bartlett before around counterfeiting. I think this is something that maybe was just not on my radar.
Yeah, it's definitely something we need to hear about. I'm curious to hear about QR code jacking, QR code quishing, new ones, new terminology coming our way. It's a big deal. This is not going to go away when we start talking about protecting the brand and cybersecurity more and more and more in the supply chain world. So this guy's an expert. Looking forward to hearing what he's got to say.
Well, maybe you haven't heard the term quishing, but Gary has, and we're going to define it with Mark Manning coming up next.
I'm Hayes Walder.
This is Gary Skinner.
And I'm Justin Poulin.
From the studios of Healthcare HQ, you're listening to Power Supply.
Joining us now on the Power Supply podcast is Mark Manning, founder and CEO at iTRACE Technologies. And Mark, we got connected from a past guest on Power Supply from last season, and we're kind of excited to continue the conversation today. The last conversation was around counterfeiting, and this is an extension of that, specifically around threats that exist in the industry today, and not just the healthcare industry, but really all industries, from the expanded use of QR codes. And so, we're seeing a lot more of this technology in place around supplies and tracking supplies, et cetera. So I'm very excited to talk to you about what's really going on out there. And welcome to the show, Mark.
Thanks very much, Justin. Appreciate the invite.
All right, I already love the accent. Compared to Gary Skinner's, this is world class. So this is going to be a welcome addition to the podcast. Thank you, Mark, for joining us.
Wow, it's off and running, Mark. Here we go.
Started.
He's not from L.A., Lower Alabama. I can tell.
So, Mark, why don't you talk a little bit about your background? And, you're a tech entrepreneur is maybe a good way to tee it up.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, so I'm Mark Manning, founder and CEO of iTRACE Technologies. We founded iTRACE in about 2016 to help brands fight issues of counterfeit and gray market trading of their products. So I've been in brand protection and supply chain security since about 2004, so just over 22 years now in helping different organizations secure their supply chain and protect their brands. I've also been a brand owner. I was co-founder of a company called Dodo Case out of San Francisco that made handcrafted cases for Apple's iPad. And we saw those being counterfeit from plastic copies coming in from overseas. And one of the other big advantages I have in this industry is I've also spent time in cybersecurity. So when I come into the supply chain space, I'm looking at it through a lens of having been a brand owner, having been in cybersecurity, and been in supply chain security for 20-something years. So that's, living out here in Silicon Valley, California, gives me the opportunity to look at a lot of different technologies, a lot of different applications to help fight counterfeit, gray market, and supply chain security issues.
Let's talk about QR codes and why the expanded use, right? I mean, I think everybody kind of knows why to move away from barcodes. We get a lot more information out of QR codes, but QR codes have been around for a while. It's not like it's brand new over the last 5 years. So why the explosion?
Yeah, QR codes were invented back in the NIS by the Denso Corporation in Japan to help move automotive parts through Toyota's manufacturing facilities in a more efficient way. So they were invented a long time ago, and they had a great use for connecting physical parts to information. Really, during the pandemic, the use of QR codes exploded as people wanted to get touchless with payments and other engagement with your menu in your restaurant and with parking meters and that kind of thing. So what happened during that period was there was an explosion in the use of QR codes, helped by the fact that Android and iPhone devices were enabled to scan those QR codes natively with the camera. That kind of changed the engagement model of people connecting with businesses, corporations, and applications. And that really changed the way people were using the QR code from just a logistics technology to an engagement tool that connected people with data and organizations.
Can you kind of compare that to the 1D barcode? Because I'm assuming, our smartphones could just as easily scan a 1D barcode as they can a 2D or QR code, right? But for some reason, it's really the 2D barcode that's taken this to another level with the smartphone and, like you said, Android technology.
Yeah, the big difference is a 1D barcode is really just text information encoded in black and white lines. The difference with a QR code is, in its name, it's a quick response code, in that when you scan it, the device actually does something. The device can be made to open a website, to connect to a service, to perform some kind of activity that you won't get from a barcode or a standard 1D code that have been used beforehand. So the big difference is that the QR code causes an action to occur, and you don't necessarily have control over what that action is.
It's the person who's scanning, you mean?
Yeah, the person who's scanning it. If you scan a QR code with your device, it's going to make that device do something. Now, you
don't know what it's going to do.
Necessarily know what that is, right?
Which is the danger, I guess. Yeah.
It is a big part of the danger of the capabilities of a QR code over a standard 1D barcode or data matrix code.
Mark, this quick question. Are there different, our end users are asking these questions, QR codes, and Hayes already made fun of me living out in the beautiful God's country of the Northwest. QR codes might be a little bit new to us, but are there different types of QR codes? Is there a diversity of it's not just one, but there's all kinds of options? You kind of talked about that a little bit, but I'm thinking healthcare, supply chain, trying to pull it down that road, healthcare specifically, if you could talk about that just a little bit for our listeners.
Yeah, so the QR code is a specific specification of a 2D marker, and it's generally got a bunch of little square dots with three square boxes in each corner. And it's very distinctive from a data matrix code in that a QR code has a specific format and it follows a specific specification in its layout and design. Data that can be put into the QR code can be customized in many, many different ways. But the structure of a QR code is basically the same, although you'll see different artistic variations where people can encode the same information into a logo. They can make it circular. You can do all kinds of things with it. As long as you've got the 3 square boxes for orientation and the rest of the information is encoded in a specific way. So you can make them look kind of different, but they are all following the QR code standard, which means iPhone, Android devices, and all of the commercial readers in the hospitals can read those QR codes.
Okay. Thank you for that.
So, Mark, I mean, I definitely understand kind of the risk here, because the 1D barcode gives you a data point. The 2D barcode or quick response code creates an action that increases risk for the user. They can't control the action. So one thing that you told me that really teed up this conversation today is that the FBI released a warning around malicious QR codes. So I believe what you're going to tell us is something along the lines of, since the QR codes aren't necessarily secure and the user doesn't have control over what those QR codes are going to action on their device potentially, that with the widespread adoption from the consumer market as well, that this is where this risk is coming into play today. Can you dive in a little bit deeper? Like, what was the FBI getting at? What are their major concerns?
Yeah. So the FBI warning started maybe 2 or 3 years ago, where they were alerting people to a number of scams that can occur around QR codes. And the warnings have got louder and they've got more prevalent from many, many different organizations. So the FBI issued the first warning 2 or 3 years ago. They've issued subsequent warnings in the past 2 or 3 years. And the most recent one was about 6 or 8 weeks ago, where they have identified North Korean actors deploying malicious QR codes on things like parking meters or in emails or on, just posters on signs to gain access to people's systems and devices. So you will scan a QR code. It may take you to a replica of the intended site that you were supposed to go to, but it will also download malware in the background onto your device that will steal credentials, that will, capture your keystrokes and the information you're inputting into that device that they can then use to gain access to other systems and services. So that's the FBI warnings, but there's many, many more.
So Mark, is this called quishing versus phishing?
Correct. QR phishing is exactly the term.
Whoa, Skinner did some research.
That means Skinner knows how to use ChatGPT. I'm impressed. I'm very impressed.
I do my research.
That's a great point.
Absolutely, Mark. Phishing versus quishing. There we go. We knew this. There we go. All right.
Yeah, so there's 2 forms of QR code attack. One is the quishing attack, which you're describing there, which is I'm trying to get you to scan this QR code. So as you think you're going to your bank account and you think you're putting in your bank credentials, and I'm actually stealing them because you've gone to a fake website.
Wow.
Or I'm trying to get you to put personal information into the response of the QR code. The other is what's called QR jacking, where I will take a parking meter or a parking kiosk, for example, and I will create my own QR code sticker to put over that parking meter or parking kiosk. So when you scan for parking, you'll be paying me for parking. And in a couple of weeks' time, you'll get a parking ticket from the town or the municipality that owned the parking meter because you didn't actually pay for that parking. So the 2 things go hand in hand because you can have one leading to the other. I can QR jack you, and I can also quish you because I'm going to get personal information, payment information, bank information from you that I can use. So the incentives for different organizations drive them in different directions. Nation states are trying to get access to systems and devices of businesses and government officials by getting them to scan a QR code and stealing the credentials. Criminal organizations are just trying to steal your money and figure out how they can continue the scam after they've got your first parking meter payment. There's an example of a policeman in the UK that was scammed out of, I think it was £3.50 in parking fees, but subsequently lost around $10,000 or £10,000 in follow-up scams because they had his personal information, and then they used that information to scam him multiple times after that. So these are the kind of attacks that are occurring around QR codes today.
You know, Mark, the description of the parking that happened, I know that happened in Nashville 6-8 months ago. And all they did was, apparently, they showed it on the news. They just put their QR code over the QR code of the place. And no telling how many people, in a given day, a couple hundred people could scan it. And I don't know if they got them down the road like you described, but just get it in the first day is a pretty good payday for sure.
Yeah, I think the rumors are that when they restickered the parking meters in Austin, Texas, they made about $2 million before the parking meters got actually restickered again properly, or the stickers were removed. Wow. Yeah, it's very profitable. It's a great business model.
Great.
Until you go to jail.
It's a great business model. Yeah. It doesn't cost anything to create a QR code.
I know.
Start up your own business.
It's nonviolent and it's really easy to do, I would think.
Yeah. So because of that, every cybersecurity company, all of the government organizations like the Federal Trade Commission, many different media organizations have been putting out warnings about scanning QR codes and warning people not to scan QR codes. And if you really have to, you've got to inspect it, make sure it's not been stickered over. And it's very, very difficult for a normal person to identify a scam QR code from a legitimate QR code.
Well, there's also a scam I've recently heard where they'll send you a package at home, like from Amazon or whatever, and it'll be a trinket of some sort. But if you want to find out, or to say thank you to who sent it to you, you hit the QR code. And of course, that's malicious code, I guess.
Yeah, it's called the brushing scam. And it started off as a way to get better reviews on Amazon, because you had to have actually shipped a product to somebody before you could have them create a positive review. But it's turned into a bigger scam in the way you're describing, and a way to steal people's information. A friend of mine was sent a set of fence posts with a QR code on it, because you can't just put a set of fence posts in the trash. You're going to try and scan the QR code to return it, right? So they're sending low-cost, large items that make it more likely that you'll scan the QR code to get a return label to return that product. So they're getting smart when they're dealing with these things.
Holy cow.
It makes me think of these QR codes on very expensive implant costs or sets, or that are coming into the hospital supply chain world, that there's a lot of dollars involved, and that could really disrupt the infrastructure of a healthcare system, period. Mark, I don't know if you've ever heard of it in that world, or in like one of the big total joint programs or total shoulders. I mean, their cybersecurity has to be really, really buttoned up as well if they're using the QR codes for inventory asset management.
Yeah, I mean, if I were a malicious actor and I wanted to gain access to a healthcare facility, potentially I could create a fake product, put a QR code on it, convince someone that, hey, I couldn't scan this for some reason. There seems to be something wrong with it. Can you scan it with your device? And they scan that and, potentially could give access to sensitive data or sensitive information. Putting QR codes on products for track, trace, and authentication is really a benefit to the counterfeiters, as opposed to a hurdle or a deterrent, because it's so easy for them to create their own QR codes that create a malicious action that is unintentional for the user. And, this is the thing that we're trying to reconcile today, is people are trying to use QR codes for security when all of the cybersecurity folks and the supply chain folks and government organizations are warning people not to scan QR codes. It's a dilemma that people are facing.
You've essentially scared me to death to ever scan one now. So,
we can finish.
Yeah, so we're done here. All right, so but number one, Mark, by just looking at a QR code, there's no way of knowing good or bad, correct?
Correct.
So, but as soon as I scan it, it's going to open up something. And there's generally, it's at that point, could it be too late? Or do I still have to enter information in order to make it?
Yeah.
So you don't know what the URL is going to do. What AI has enabled in very recent times is the ability for cyber criminals and malicious actors to automate the process of replicating a website. So I think it was Reid Hoffman, chairman of PayPal, co-founder of LinkedIn. He was able to put a one-line prompt into the Replit AI engine and clone LinkedIn at a usable level. So being able to copy a service website or a login website or a login page is stupidly simple in the day of AI, and with the QR code taking you to a fake version of a legitimate website.
And they're very, very good, by the way. I actually had a phishing thing happen to me yesterday with one of my clients. She sent me an email, and it didn't look right. I emailed or texted her, "Did you send this to me?" She goes, "No," but I had already replied back to her, and they replied back to me. So the bad guy literally was emailing on her behalf back to me. And that's what kind of was like, this is different level. But but if I just scan it and it opens up a browser, let's say, as long as I don't engage, I'm not infected with a malware or anything like that necessarily.
That depends. It depends on what site you've landed on and what capabilities that website has. I don't think that's a given, to be honest with you, in today's cyber.
All right, so now I'll never do that again. Thank you very much.
I think the important thing too that Mark was pointing out was it can register keystrokes. Right.
Well, all of it's terrible. I mean,
like once the malware is on your device, it can track what websites you're going to and then start to collect the passwords, which I think is probably one of the biggest concerns, right, Mark? And I'm thinking about this for healthcare, and we'll kind of get there in a second, but we hear about, concerns about breaches and, maintaining safety. I don't know how much training people in the healthcare supply chain are getting, but many times you are using your personal device to access certain work applications. And here's my question. Even if they put an MDM on your device to allow for that, Mark, it doesn't mean that if you use it for personal reasons as well, that it couldn't start to figure out what it needs to do to access your MDM. Or does MDM protect the healthcare institution from personal use devices accessing their intranet?
I think what can happen is that once you have malware on your device, you don't know what the capabilities of that malware are. And they may be able to capture keystrokes before it goes into the MDM component. Yeah, again, I think the capabilities are evolving. I'm not sure if you were watching the news recently about the Anthropic Mythos AI engine that everyone's been talking about from a cybersecurity perspective. It's just going to increase the rate that these exploits are used at and the rate that new exploits are found just at the time when large organizations are laying off their cybersecurity teams because they think they have AI is going to solve all the problems for them. So I think there's a lot of organizations are looking forward to, hey, I can cut costs here by using AI to, reduce headcount, when the tsunami coming up behind them is the AI-enabled cyber attack that they just won't have the headcount to manage.
Yeah, it's kind of being used against you. Yeah.
Let's talk about something people in healthcare are, or at least if they're listeners of this podcast, should be somewhat aware of, which is GS1 standards or GS1 initiatives. And one of the initiatives is a digital product password. And so I realize GS1 is not, limited to healthcare, but I'd be interested, Mark, if you could tell us what this digital product password is, and some of those GS1 initiatives, and what are the implications of it?
Yeah, so commonly known as the DPP. The DPP is the digital product passport that is going to identify and give identity to individual items. And it's a European Union requirement that is being phased in over the next few years. It's starting off with batteries, EV batteries and other batteries in 2027, and moving to clothing and consumer goods, and then all products, I think by 2030 something. Not sure of the exact complete rollout schedule. But the digital product passport requires that every product sold in the European Union have a QR code on it that is able to provide specifically source and origin information for that product and recycling information for that product. But it will uniquely identify every individual item that is sold. So, now imagine every Mars bar and tea bag having a QR code on it that a malicious actor could potentially replicate in their counterfeiting activities that would then enable them to QR jack or quish an unsuspecting user. GS1 is one of the driving forces behind Digital Product Passport in Europe. They've put the digital ink standard in the QR code as the data format. So you will be able to scan any QR code with your mobile device, and it will automatically take you to a page that describes the origin and recycling information for that particular item at a minimum. There's no security planned on top of that QR code. So it's going to be able to be read by any device. And one of the key requirements for the European Union mandate is that it is one click from opening the camera to getting the information that you want to receive, recycling or origin. The US equivalent of that, also from GS1, is something called Sunrise 2027, where GS1's initiative is to replace the 1D barcode that you use at checkout in the grocery store that you would wave across the checkout counter with a QR code that can perform other actions and activities, including providing product origin information, consumer engagement, and other things in the future. So now we're looking at billions more QR codes on everyday products that are going to increase the attack surface for quishing and QR jacking exponentially over the next 3 or 4 years.
Dang.
Yeah.
Wow.
That's a lot to think of right now.
Yeah.
Well, yeah. And it's sort of like an initiative that's being mandated, right? So you're almost like being forced into exposure in a way. And the wide adoption of that, Mark, is like, that's the whole purpose, right? The whole point of having that standard and that expectation is so it will be widely adopted. It'll be interesting to see how that plays out. Let's dial this in for healthcare. As we've sufficiently scared everybody, and Hayes has already said, I'm never going to use Hayes not only isn't going to use it. Yeah. No. Hayes isn't not only going to use QR codes. He's not going to Europe anytime soon either.
No, I'm throwing my phone away. I'm done.
No, he's going to loon 10,000 pounds.
I could use that. That would be helpful.
What's the concern for healthcare specifically, Mark? Like now let's hone in on, kind of our audiences. What should they be thinking about related to this risk?
Yeah, so in healthcare, there's really two main initiatives. The Drug Supply Chain Security Act is one of them. That's been an ongoing project since the late 90s, which was really a driver behind a track and trace application for pharmaceuticals. Where was it manufactured? Which supply chain and distributors did it go through? Which end user is delivering that pharmaceutical? So that requires an identifier on the package. And that's typically a data matrix code, which is not a QR code. Okay, it's a simple data matrix code that doesn't have any inherent intelligence or cause a device to do something right now. That's going to change with Google Lens, I think it is, that is going to be able to read a data matrix and perform some activity on your device based upon the information in that data matrix code. So Drug Supply Chain Security Act is one side where products are being tracked and traced through the pharmaceutical supply chain. The other is the Universal Device Identifier, which again is an initiative in the medtech space to be able to uniquely identify medical devices and potentially consumables for those medical devices. So they're the two main initiatives for tracking and tracing of pharmaceuticals and medtech or medical device components and systems. The challenge in that space is that neither of those applications actually authenticate the product. They track and trace, but they won't tell you if it's real or not. So being able to differentiate between what is a track and trace solution where I'm following something through a supply chain and what is an authentication solution that says this thing is real and it came from where it said it came from. And the challenge with Drug Supply Chain Security Act and the top 300 equivalent of it that was used in India was that it's generally on a lot and batch basis. And it means that products can still be counterfeit and enter the supply chain through an illegitimate paths.
That's not good.
Well, when we talked to Adam Bartlett, he told us like some of these manufacturing plants produce a product on the day shift that's authentic and then just switch some things up a little bit and actually do the counterfeit production on second shift and sell that into the black market. And so, I don't know if that's happening in pharmaceutical or med tech specifically. I'd be surprised if it isn't on some level, but I don't know that for sure. But Mark, I'm assuming that that's really what the concern is here, right? Is, there are applications for unique device identifier down to the instrument or the actual, rather than lot number, there's some positive implications in terms of patient traceability. But from the security perspective, that's really what we're talking about in terms of the concern, right?
Correct. And it's almost a business model in some offshore manufacturing to give you a really good deal on manufacturing your product for you during the day and then making up the difference by manufacturing it for themselves at night. And that goes across all products and all kind of different manufacturing. That's very, very common. What we're looking at as we move forward in the medtech space is actually taking the authentication of the consumable out of the hands of the user and implementing it into the device itself. So imagine, for example, a diabetic strip reader that was able to validate the strips that were being put into it to ensure they were authentic from the manufacturer, they were within date, they came through a legitimate supply chain, and they're supposed to be used in that region or device. So making these devices more intelligent, I think, is where these kind of applications are going, and you can't necessarily do that with a QR code.
All right. Well, as we wrap up, we said at the beginning, you are kind of a tech entrepreneur. And so I thought maybe you could talk a little bit about just how you're leaning into tech innovation, specifically in healthcare.
Yeah, we see that there's some challenges with the existing technologies from a track and trace perspective on things like surgical instruments and surgical implants, and being able to track, trace, and authenticate those products as part of the whole supply chain security around them is where we're driving into the healthcare space, bringing applications that are more effective at doing that than some of the current technologies like RFID, NFC, QR code, and data matrix. So being able to bring new applications that give new capabilities to track, trace, authentication, and device identification is the direction we're heading in right now.
Very interesting.
Oh, that's exciting.
Yeah, that's very cool.
I remember when I first got into healthcare supply chain, I went to a statewide conference for supply chain. And I remember seeing past guest Karen Conway present on UDI. And this was back in 2012. So it's quite a while ago. And she definitely led that conversation, I'd say, here in the States for over a decade easily. And, continues to some extent. But one of the things I remember is she was talking about how instruments are only tracked to the lot level. So you can know what type of instrument it is, but you don't know if that instrument was used on, XYZ patient yesterday or the one before that. You have no ability to look through, procedurally for that specific instrument because it could have migrated from, major ortho set 12 to major ortho set 7. And there's no way to know which set it was actually in before. So is that what you're talking about? Is essentially knowing where the instrument which set it was in and which patients they were used on?
Yeah, that full provenance of that individual instrument throughout its life cycle. So you know how many surgeries it's been used on. You know how many times it's been sterilized. You know how many times it's been repaired, refurbished, sharpened, whatever the activity that goes on with that particular item. So that full provenance and the handoff and control between the distributor, central processing and supply in the hospital, the operating theater, and back again through the sterilization process. And just being able to track individual instruments in a tray with a simple scan from a mobile device. So automating that process or making it just more efficient than it is today and providing more data that can be actioned and analyzed to understand early failure of device. When should a device not be sent to an operating theater? When should it be disposed of before the surgeon gets it in their hand? So that's the kind of application that we're able to bring by identifying uniquely the instruments and components and then providing the data to analyze that provenance throughout its life cycle.
Excellent. Hey,
Very
Mark,
cool.
Thanks so much for coming on the show today and kind of sharing some of those insights. We've had a few episodes now on security related to the supply chain, and it's great to expand that conversation a little bit with you today.
Yeah, no, I appreciate the invite and thanks for letting me come on the show. And if you have any follow-ups, just let me know. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Oh, I think we're going to have you back. This is good.
Absolutely.
So thank you so much, Mark.
Great knowledge, Mark. Great expertise for sure.
Excellent.
That was Mark Manning, founder and CEO at iTRACE Technologies, talking about the threats that we may be seeing or are seeing already from the expanded use of QR codes. And Hayes, I think he sufficiently scared you.
Oh, my goodness. I mean, yes, I'm not going to scan anything in the world. But meanwhile, he's saying that they're going to be put on more and more items and products. But, meanwhile, don't scan anything because it could be malicious. But he really did a good job, to tell us or tell me the capabilities of them and where we're going to go with it. So it was very helpful, very good. He's great at what he does.
I was so impressed that he was just rattling all that off just from his memory. Like he's obviously been immersed into this. And, that whole counterfeit conversation that we started with Adam Bartlett kind of coming into the fray here. And like we said at the end, would love to have Mark on a future podcast. Maybe we can get some updates on how things are going. But that's going to do it for this episode. On behalf of Gary Hayes and myself, to all of you out there, thanks for listening to this episode of
Power Supply. Now.
Thank you for listening to this week's episode of Power Supply. As a reminder, you can help support us by subscribing on your favorite podcast app or by downloading the smartphone app on your iPhone or Android. Simply search for Power Supply in the App Store or Google Play. The best thing about downloading the smartphone app is that you can access bonus content for certain episodes and view episodes in certain categories, like articles on the go and vendor spotlights. Are you following us on LinkedIn or Facebook yet? If you are and you love an episode or post, then let your social network know about it. Like, comment, or share our posts along with your thoughts and keep the conversation going. If you have any topics or guests that you would like to recommend for a future episode, just send us an email to info@powersupplymedia.net. We look forward to hearing from you.